It is looking great. And this for me is a really, really strong bake. And as I bite into it, it's very crisp on the base, very light texture on the actual dough part of it. The intense flavor of the olives. It's really, really, really enjoyable. Hi everyone, Greg Wade here, head baker for Pulp and Quality Bread in Chicago, 2019 James Beard Award winner for Outstanding Baker, and the new brand ambassador for Challenger Breadware. I'm here to make Roman style pizza in the Challenger bread pan, and let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is prepare our sourdough starter for the leavening of this Roman style pizza. What we're going to do is take a pinch, this is 20 grams of sourdough starter. You should never use the last of your sourdough starter if you ever want to make bread again. So this is 20 grams of sourdough starter, about 20 grams of warm 80-degree water, and 20 grams of bread flour. So you combine all of this and then you just mix it up by hand until all the flour is absorbed and everything is very smooth and even. And then you'll let this ferment at room temperature for about 4 hours. It should triple in volume, and that's how you'll know that it's going to be ready. Okay, so it's been about 4 hours and our sourdough starter is ready to use. What we're going to do is take all 60 grams of the sourdough starter that we made. Remember, you should have reserved some off to the side for your next baking project. I'm going to add this to 315 grams of water, 365 grams of bread flour, and 95 grams of whole wheat flour. Okay, so the starter, as you dump it into the water, you should notice that it floats. This means that it has enough yeast and bacteria in it to leaven your bread. I am going to add in my flour. My water temperature is, again, warm. It's going to be about 80 degrees. And I'm going to mix it up by hand until all of the flour is absorbed. So what we're going to be entering is called the AUTOLYSE process. So we're mixing together flour, water, and sourdough starter. And we're just going to let this rest for at least 15 minutes, but 30 minutes would be better. And what's going to happen is the flour is going to absorb water and is going to allow two of the proteins in wheat, glutenin and gliadin, to form gluten. Okay, gluten being that elastic web that will provide structure to the bread, but also catch the gas, which is going to leaven it. Okay, so important things to notice here is that your dough seems kind of pockmarked and shaggy, right? And as I pull at it, it does not make it very far until it breaks, okay? So this is an indicator of very, very short gluten chains, which is going to have an impact on your final product. So what's going to happen is the flour, when absorbed with water, is going to develop very long gluten chains, and that's going to improve the overall structure of the bread and give us a nice internal open crumb and shorten our mixing time. So all of this gets mixed together. We're going to let it rest for at least 15 minutes. So our dough has been resting for about 15-20 minutes so far. And some quality differences that you can see is that it's become much more smooth, that when I pull at it, now I'm getting much longer gluten chains, okay? So this is really, really, really important. This is why we do this, okay? Because these long chains are going to provide that really nice, large internal structure that we're looking for. So, what I'm going to do now is add salt. We withheld salt at the beginning because salt strengthens the ionic bonds between gluten chains. So if we were to add it at the beginning, when we had those really short chains, it would just lock those up and we would have a very tight crumb. So what we're doing is letting these really long chains develop, and then we lock it up with the salt, and all I do is squeeze it in like this by hand. And you can see now that when I do this, when I pull, it is very, very, very strong. Okay, so that's the strength of the salt working on the dough. So I just squeeze it in by hand like this, and then I start adding my second addition of water. What I have found is that you're able to create a much stronger dough by mixing in most of the water at first, and then withholding on this recipe, I think we withheld about 50 grams of water. So that 50 grams gets added now along with our 10 grams of salt. And I'm just squeezing the dough through my hands like this until it's all back together. Okay, and you can kind of pull at it in the bowl like this. But really that squeezing motion is really what's going to help bring it back together. Once the water is in, I do the exact same thing with our 10 grams of olive oil. The olive oil in the dough is going to help tenderize it a little bit. Okay? So just giving it just a slight bit of richness, which will add to the crispness of the final product, which is really, really desirable. Okay? So once all of my water is absorbed and my dough is one solid mass again, we're gonna call this done. So really a very short amount of mixing, and by no means is this full gluten at all. There's still, very kind of pockmarked and shaggy. But this will develop structure as it bulk ferments for the next 2 days in the refrigerator. We are now in the bulk fermentation stage of our dough development. So after our final mix, we let the dough ferment for about an hour, hour and a half at room temperature before refrigerating it overnight, and that's where we come in here. So this is just after the 1 full day in the refrigerator, and you can see that it's still a little bit pockmarked and shaggy, but you are seeing some gas bubbles, which is good, and you're starting to see a little bit of structure and strength, and this is only going to develop a little bit more over the next day and a half in the fridge. Okay, and what you're developing in bulk fermentation is really the character of the dough. You're really getting a lot of the organic acids that make up the good flavors and aromas of bread products, especially sourdough products, and you're also developing the sensibility and workability of the dough. So this part really, really important. And the Roman style pizza is a little bit unique in the fact that we cold ferment it for 2 days before we go ahead and shape it. Really allowing all of the bacteria and the yeast to break down the complex sugars that are in flour, and it's going to end up being a very light and crisp product. So each day that it's in the refrigerator, we do have to pull it out, we do have to fold it to introduce some fresh oxygen, which is needed for fermentation, and it's also going to help build some dough strength and some dough structure. So the way that we do that is we go up from underneath each side of the dough, we pull up and over each side, and then you can actually flip the entire thing one last time over. So then this then gets returned to the fridge for another day. We fold it again tomorrow, and then the next day we'll bring it out, we'll portion it and shape it. Okay, it is our bake day and our dough is ready to shape. It has been fermenting in the refrigerator for a few days, and you can see that it's gotten really lively and active. You can see tons of bubbles in here, which is really, really great. When I pull at it, you can feel a ton of air in there and also a lot of strength to the dough, which is really what we're looking for. So to work with this, what I'm gonna do is dust the workstation with a little bit of flour, and then release the dough onto the workstation, and a little bit of flour on top of it actually. Now I'm going to divide this in half. Okay, so each dough should weigh about 450 grams if you care about that sort of thing. At the bakery we do. We're going to round it and put it into some bannetons, some proofing baskets. I'm going to prep the baskets with a little bit of flour on all sides of it. So I always make sure to tilt and then I pinch and dust like this. And make sure that you do go up to the walls of the basket, because as the bread or as the dough proofs, it is going to rise and stick to those walls. So you want to make sure that those are floured as well. So I'm now going to shape this, and what I can do to do that is kind of take each side and go up and over the dough, much like how we did when we folded the bread. And then I go ahead and with the bench scraper on the table, I round the dough such as this until it is smooth and taut, okay? And then I pick it up and go seam side up into the basket. So my motion here is I go up with the scraper kind of at an angle like this, you can see, and then I turn it 90 degrees and I come back down. So this is ultimately the motion when I'm rounding something, and then I use my left hand to support it, okay? So when you put dough in front of that, again, my scraper goes up, I turn 90 degrees and I pull, and that is what creates the tensile strength against the table like this. So up and down, up and down. And I'm just using my left hand to support and help it come off the scraper like that. So again, into the basket, seam side up, and this will ferment for about 3.5 hours, and you can cover it with a linen towel such as this to prevent them from drying out. But 3.5 hours at room temperature now. All right, our dough is ready to bake. We can tell this because it's really nicely risen. You can see lots of gas bubbles in there, which is a really, really good thing. When I press on it, my fingerprint does start to spring back a little bit, which is good, but I also feel tons of air in there, which is really what we're looking for. So this took about 3.5 hours. And to work with this, I'm going to lightly dust a little bit of flour on top of the dough to make sure that it's dry. Anytime you see that the dough is shiny, you're really running the risk of it sticking to your workstation. So I dry it out with a little bit of flour. Then to actually work with the dough, what I do is dust the workstation with semolina. I always use something coarse like semolina or fine cornmeal to work with a dough like this, because only a finite amount of it is going to stick to the bottom of the dough, versus if you're picking up a bunch of flour with it, then you're running the risk of it caking on the bottom there. So I am going to gently release the dough from the basket onto the workstation, and then dimple it by going straight down with my fingertips. You don't want to go down and out, otherwise you'll run the risk of tearing your dough that you worked so hard over a few days to develop. So always just go straight down to try to relax the dough, and then you can gently pull from underneath to get it to the size of your pan. Okay, so that looks good to me. Now what I'm going to do is take the Challenger bread pan out of the oven. It's been preheated to 475. Okay, remember this is very, very hot, so please be careful. I'm going to pour a pretty generous amount of nice olive oil into the base of the pan, enough to cover it. It's okay that it smokes a little bit. And then I'm going to get up underneath and pick the dough up and let it sit in the base of the pan with the hot oil. If you see a large bubble like this, you can kind of tear your dough a little bit to release it. Now you can add any toppings that you like. I like using two types of olives. When I'm using olives, I use Castelvetranos because they are really thick and meaty and have a great flavor, but also they retain their texture throughout baking. Okay, so I like to use these, and then I also have some chopped up Kalamatas because I really do enjoy their flavor as well. But I chop them up because they don't retain their texture in baking anyway, so you're able to kind of disperse them a little bit more. You're not really missing anything out texture-wise. And then what I'll do is really just press them in there one last time. And then what I can do is just one last drizzle of the nice olive oil on top. You can use whatever ingredients you like. You know, sauce, cheese, dealer's choice. I'm now going to return the bread to the oven. And at 475, this should take about 15 minutes in this oven, but you'll know your oven best. You're looking for crust color now, so whatever color you enjoy your baked products at, you'll take it to that color. All right, so it's been about 15 minutes since we put our Roman style pizza in the oven, and it's smelling delicious, so I'm gonna remove it from the oven. And it is looking great. A lot of that olive oil got absorbed into the bread, which is gonna be delicious. And I'm going to remove it from the pan. And this for me is a really, really strong bake. So pretty dark in color, but we got tons of air pockets in here. We have a very nice caramelized base, which is gonna end up being very crisp and crackery. And I'm really, really excited about this. So once you've let your Roman style pizza cool for as long as you can stand it, let's cut it open and give it a shot. I'm gonna use a mezzaluna here, and you just rock it back and forth. And let's open this up and really look inside there. Just beautiful open structure, really nice crisp base. So remember, these really open holes in cell structure is from the AUTOLYSE process that we employed at the beginning of our mix, and then the higher hydration of our dough, and really the intensive care that we took to ferment this dough for a few days. So you can hear that it's very, very crisp, which is a great thing. And I'm going to give this a shot. You know, the perfume of the olives and the olive oil is really heavily scenting the air. And as I bite into it, it's very crisp on the base, very light texture on the actual dough part of it. You know, the intense flavor of the olives. It's really, really, really enjoyable.